shoulders, and I knew I had been abandoned before the words finished landing. $11,000 hung between us like a sentence already decided, and Logan Harper didn't look back. I had never imagined myself standing in a five-star hotel lobby in downtown Chicago, especially not at 63 years old with hands shaped by bleach and worn mop handles. The marble floors shone so brightly, they reflected my bent posture back at me, and the air smelled faintly of lilies arranged in towering glass vases I could never afford. I kept tugging at the sleeves of my old cardigan, smoothing wrinkles that refused to disappear, trying to shrink myself into something less noticeable. Logan walked beside me with an ease that felt foreign, his stride confident. His voice warm when he told me this weekend was his way of saying, "Thank you for everything I had done for him." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that after a lifetime of scrubbing other people's messes, I had finally raised a man who saw me. At the checkout desk, the manager smiled politely as he read the charges, his tone practiced and gentle as if the number meant nothing more than ink on paper. Logan leaned in and hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thanks for the stay, Mom." And before I could respond, he stepped away so quickly the warmth of him vanished like breath on glass. I watched him walk toward the revolving doors without turning his head. Brielle Knox following close behind, her heels clicking sharply against the floor like punctuation marks, sealing my fate. My throat tightened as the manager waited for my card. And when I told him there had to be a mistake, his eyes softened just a fraction as he said there wasn't. That was when a quieter voice drifted from behind the counter, older and steadier, asking gently if I was the daughter of Walter Price. Hearing my father's name spoken aloud after so many years felt like the floor shifting beneath me. I turned to see a woman with silver hair pulled back neatly, her name tag reading Nora Weller, her gaze fixed on me with an intensity that felt unsettling. She repeated the question softly, and I could only nod as the lobby blurred around me, my chest tightening with confusion and shame. Nora asked the manager if she could step away, then guided me toward a small staff room tucked behind the desk, a narrow space humming with the sound of a microwave and an aging coffee pot. Inside, I sank into a chair that squeaked under my weight, while Nora handed me a paper cup of lukewarm tea. Her movements careful and deliberate. She told me she had known my father years ago, that she had worked for him, and the way she said it carried a weight I didn't yet understand. When she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope sealed with yellowed tape, my breath caught as I recognized Walter's uneven handwriting scrawled across the front. Nora said he had instructed her to give it to me only if I ever showed up at this hotel looking lost or desperate, and the precision of that moment made my hands shake as I held the envelope in my lap. A knock on the door interrupted us. The manager reminding me that the bill still waited outside, and Nora explained gently that the hotel couldn't release me without some form of payment. As panic pressed in from all sides, my fingers tightened around the envelope, a quiet instinct whispering that whatever my father had left inside might be the only thing standing between me and collapse. With the hum of appliances filling the room and the distant murmur of guests beyond the walls, I slid my thumb beneath the brittle seal, unaware that the words waiting inside were about to unravel everything I thought I knew about my past and my son. My father's handwriting pulled me backward in time the moment I unfolded the letter, the ink uneven and slightly slanted the way it always was when he wrote in a hurry or late at night. He began without pleasantries, saying he knew I had every right to hate him and that he deserved nothing from me, not forgiveness, not remembrance, not even grief. Sitting in that cramped staff room with my knees drawn close, I felt each sentence land like a quiet confession spoken too late. Walter Price wrote about the life he had hidden from my mother, about the lies he carried so carefully they became routine, and about the shame that followed him everywhere, even into sleep. He admitted he had built something substantial behind our backs, something he was never brave enough to bring home. And as I read, the image I had carried of him as a simple, silent man began to fracture. Near the bottom of the page, he mentioned documents stored in a locker outside Cleveland, a place where he kept the proof of everything he had concealed. Taped to the letter was a small brass key, cool and heavier than it looked, etched with the number 114B. I folded the letter slowly, my heart thudding as if it were trying to outrun the realization settling in my chest. Nora Weller watched me quietly, her hands folded in front of her, and said she didn't know what was in that unit, only that Walter had insisted I be the one to find it if the moment ever came. The hotel bill still waited outside the door like a threat, but suddenly it felt like a symptom rather than the disease. When I stepped back into the lobby, the manager explained my options in a voice that remained professional but strained, offering a structured payment plan that would take years to settle. I signed because I had no choice, my name looking small and uncertain at the bottom of the page. The morning sun felt harsher than before, the city louder and sharper, and on the train ride back to Ohio I reread my father's letter until the words blurred. He wrote about property, about income that had flowed quietly for decades, and about a trust he had created for his children. Plural. By the time I reached my apartment above the laundromat, the familiar smell of detergent felt like the only solid thing left in my world. I sat on the couch, the key pressed into my palm until it left an imprint, and tried to make sense of the idea that my father had lived a double life, while my mother worked herself sick, and I cleaned houses to survive. I planned to visit the storage unit the next morning, but before I could gather my thoughts, my phone buzzed with Logan Harper's name. When I answered, his voice was tight and impatient, asking if anyone at the hotel had said anything unusual. I mentioned Nora and my father's name, and the pause that followed wasn't surprise, it was fear. He told me not to dig into the past, that it would only hurt me, and when I asked what he was hiding, the line went dead. That silence settled deeper than any insult. As night fell, sleep refused to come, and every time I closed my eyes I saw Logan's back as he walked away from me in that lobby. By dawn, resolve replaced confusion, and I knew nothing would stop me from opening that storage unit. Whatever waited inside belonged to the truth. And for the first time in my life, I was done letting others decide which truths I deserved to face. The drive to the storage facility took nearly an hour, the sky still gray and heavy as if the day itself hadn't decided what it wanted to be. My hands stayed tight on the steering wheel, the brass key resting in the cup holder where I could see it with every glance downward, its dull shine a quiet reminder that there was no turning back. The rows of beige metal doors looked endless when I arrived, lined up like sealed mouths along cracked concrete, and Unit 114B sat at the far end beneath a flickering bulb that buzzed faintly. When the key slid into the lock and turned with a soft click, a strange stillness settled over me, the kind that makes your ears ring because everything else has gone quiet. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood, untouched but not forgotten. A folding table stood against the wall with a single lamp resting on top, its cord wrapped neatly, as if someone had cared enough to leave things orderly. Boxes were stacked along one side, each labeled in my father's handwriting, and the sight of his careful lettering made my chest ache in a way I hadn't expected. I opened the nearest box and found folders filled with property deeds, rental agreements, and tax records, all meticulously organized. As I flipped through them, the truth revealed itself with brutal clarity. Hadn't been barely scraping by the way we believed. He had owned multiple rental homes for decades, properties that generated steady income, while my mother worked herself into exhaustion and I cleaned other people's homes to survive. At the bottom of the box, my breath caught when I found 2 birth certificates, one bearing my name and the other belonging to someone named Caleb Price. The realization settled slowly, heavy and unavoidable, that I wasn't the only child my father had hidden away. The next box held hospital bills, old photographs, and handwritten notes addressed to a woman named Maria, her handwriting gentle and hopeful in a way that suggested she had believed in promises that were never fully kept. Beneath those papers lay a thick folder clipped together neatly, the title printed across the top reading Price Family Trust. My hands shook as I skimmed the pages. The language plain but firm, outlining assets, beneficiaries, and a clause that made my pulse race. The trust named 2 beneficiaries, Caleb and me, and included a provision stating that if anyone attempted to manipulate, coerce, or interfere with either beneficiary's claim, that person could be legally barred from any involvement. I sank onto the cold concrete floor, the weight of the pages pressing down on me as understanding dawned. Logan's behavior, the hotel, the phone call, all of it suddenly fit into a picture I hadn't wanted to see. Before I could gather myself, footsteps echoed behind me, sharp and hurried. I turned to see Logan standing in the doorway, his face flushed, and eyes wide with something close to panic. He asked what I was doing there, his voice trying and failing to sound calm, and when I held up the trust papers, the color drained from his face. He stepped closer, insisting I didn't understand, that this wasn't what it looked like, and when I asked how long he had known, he admitted he'd found a letter years ago among my father's things. He said he hadn't told me because he thought it would break me. But the words rang hollow as he reached for the papers and I pulled them back. Before either of us could speak again, a shadow filled the doorway, and a man introduced himself quietly as Caleb Price, his presence steady and unyielding as he explained. The law firm had flagged suspicious emails sent in my name. Logan said nothing, and in that silence, I felt the last pieces of my old world begin to crumble. Caleb Price stepped fully into the unit, his boots echoing softly against the concrete as his eyes moved from the papers in my hands to Logan's face, and the tension between them felt sharp enough to cut skin. He said the law firm managing the trust had contacted him months earlier after receiving a string of emails from different accounts, all asking variations of the same question about what would happen if I were unable to manage my share. Hearing that, Logan's shoulders tightened, and when he finally spoke, it wasn't denial that came out but justification. He said he had only been trying to make things fair, that he had grown up watching me live small, scrubbing floors and counting pennies, while money that should have been ours sat hidden. He told me I didn't understand power, that I had survived by staying quiet, and that he was tired of losing. Listening to my own son speak that way felt like something inside me folding in on itself. I realized in that moment that Logan wasn't afraid for me. He was afraid of me, afraid of what I might claim if I stopped shrinking. When he asked if I was choosing Caleb over him, the answer came quietly but firmly as I told him I wasn't choosing anyone. I was choosing the truth. My voice didn't tremble, and that surprised me most of all. Logan's expression shifted from disbelief to anger, then to something wounded and sharp, and he muttered that I would regret this before turning and storming away, his footsteps fading down the corridor until the unit felt hollow again. The hearing took place later that week in a law office that smelled faintly of paper and polished wood. Caleb sat beside me, offering a steady presence without words, and when it was my turn to speak, I told everything as plainly as I could: the hotel bill, the emails, the manipulation, and the way my son had walked away from me when he thought I was a burden. I didn't cry. I didn't soften the truth. The attorneys listened, asked careful questions, and when their decision came, it was swift and final. Logan was barred from any involvement in the trust, his actions meeting the very clause my father had insisted upon. The assets were to be divided between Caleb and me exactly as written, no more and no less. Walking out of that building, I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was steadiness, the kind that comes when the ground finally stops shifting beneath your feet. Caleb walked me to my car, the evening light stretching long across the pavement, and said he hoped we could build something better from here, something honest that our father never managed to give either of us. I told him I believed we could, and for the first time in years, the belief didn't feel fragile. I paid down the hotel bill, not all at once, but enough to breathe again, and I began to understand that the money itself wasn't the miracle. The miracle was the permission to stop apologizing for existing, to stop letting shame decide my worth. I had spent a lifetime cleaning up after other people's messes, believing that survival meant silence, but the truth my father left behind, as painful as it was, gave me something I had never had before: the right to stand fully in my own life. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that it is never too late to claim the truth you deserve, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that honor resilience and quiet strength. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, because stories like this are not meant to be carried alone.